first episode of Agriculture Webinar Series. I'm organizing this series in my current capacity as I'm a writers professor and on behalf of Pakistan Academy of Sciences as Punjab representative. I'm also grateful to other collaborators in this effort who are Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, Islamabad, and CASD at Pir Mir Ali Shah University of Air and Agriculture, Rawalpindi. We have our media partner, which is Pak China Express, China Economic Net. At the very outset, I wish to state that we are going to discuss the science for solutions in this series and promote debate for the furtherance of knowledge through research. As far as the first episode is concerned, I have received a lot of calls and people have been asking the outlook of this event. And I would like to clarify right at the beginning that this is purely a research-oriented discussion. We will not speak about the political economy of wheat. I would like to inform you that I have shared a problem statement with our keynote speakers and Dr. Kamarpal Duga, who is our first speaker. He will begin with that slide. The title of the slide is Stagnant Wheat. And we believe that stagnant wheat is because of some genetic reasons. There is seed technology and agronomy. Today, we will be focusing largely on genetics and a bit of seed technology. We may have to do another event if we have to discuss the agronomy and other issues related to stagnation and wheat. I want to also, take the opportunity to welcome Syed Fakhr Imam, Federal Minister for Food Security and Research. And I want to place on record that Syed Fakhr Imam is deeply interested in research part of our engagement. And I hope that today we will set a good stage for research debate in the future episodes to come. I would also like to make a disclosure that when I announced the possibility of running this webinar series, Syed Jawar Ali contacted me and told me that let's not worry about a lot of science. Let's first talk about wheat and genetics of milk production in our livestock. So this first episode is entirely being organized on the instance of Syed Jawar Ali, who is also present in the audience. And his second demand on animal genetics shall be presented on 8th of August. We have already planned another event, which will be episode 3 on animal genetics. Now I will move on to introduction of our speakers of the day. Dr. Kamarpal Duga and I have known each other for nearly 37 years. We went to graduate school together at the University of California, Riverside, where he did his PhD thesis in genetics with Professor Giles Baines. From Riverside, Kamarpal went to Stanford and he did a long postdoctoral stint at Stanford and onwards to Pioneer Hybrid, where he had a mature career in genetics before becoming head of biotechnology program at CIMMYT. Those of you who are not familiar with CIMMYT in the audience, most of you I'm sure must be knowing what is CIMMYT. CIMMYT is an organization which was established by Nobel laureate Borlaug in Mexico. And our memory of Green Revolution begins with the name of a variety we named as Maxi-Pak. Maxi for Mexico and Pak for Pakistan. And in reality, till today, most of the genetics in wheat that we are growing is still Maxi-Pak. So we will hear from Kamarpal where we stand today in terms of genetic improvement of wheat and how from wheat programs at CIMMYT. Our second speaker of the day is Kulvinder Gill. Professor Kulvinder Gill is a very high caliber research wheat geneticist at Washington State University Pullman. Dr. Gill is a student of another Gill who was a wheat geneticist at Kansas State University. Dr. Gill at Kansas State University is former recipient of World Food Prize. And today I'm presenting to you two more potential recipients of World Food Prize, both Kamarpal Toga and Kulvinder Gill. Our discussers today are our DG Research, Dr. Abid Mahmood. Dr. Abid Mahmood is a graduate of Cambridge, and he heads Youth Agriculture Research Institute in Faisalabad. Our second discussant is Dr. Anjum Ali Buttar. Dr. Anjum Buttar is graduate of University of Agriculture, Faisalabad, and he is Encyclopedia of Agriculture in Punjab government. Before I ask the speakers to speak, I will first request some opening remarks from Sayyid Yawar Ali. But I would also like to mention that there are some housekeeping announcements. Each speaker will speak for 20 minutes, followed by 10 minutes with the discussants. That will be followed by a Q&A session. During the presentations, I request all the participants to keep your mics muted. Only the mics will be open for those who are allowed to ask questions. We'll collect questions and then we'll ask the panelists to respond. So now I request Sayyid Yawar Ali to make opening remarks, and that will be followed by presentation by Dr. Kamarpal Toga. Sayyid Yawar Ali, please. I suppose Sayyid Yawar Ali was online. Huh? Please unmute your mic, sir.
Ji, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Good morning and good evening from wherever you are. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Achha. So I was saying that this is a very good and positive initiative by Dr. Ikrar, especially in the year of the Zoom. It makes it easier for us to be able to see each other and talk to each other. But what is the key here is the genetics part. I think that plays a very important role both in the agriculture side as well as in the livestock. So if, and we've seen that in the Maxi Park, it transformed the whole wheat and the agriculture of Pakistan to a very, very positive way. And we would like to do the same thing on the livestock side. How can we improve breed? How can we make the farmer profitable and also be able to produce more from the same cow or buffalo that we have? So this is my initial remarks, and maybe we'll come back later. Thank you, sir.
Sir, for opening the session, now I request Dr. Kamarpal Toga to take over. Unmute your mic, please.
Okay, yeah. So I want to start by thanking Ikrar to invite me. I don't know if I'm qualified to speak at this forum. My best qualification is that we were classmates together at UC Riverside, and also Ikrar's family migrated from about 10 miles from my village back in the eastern Punjab, Susan. So that's our friendship, last almost 40 years, I would say 37, 38 years. So anyway, so when Ikrar asked, I didn't want to say no, but like I said that I have done some breeding, but I am not currently a breeder. And I know those of you in the audience who are breeders, they're going to be thinking, oh, wow, here comes another armchair expert who's going to tell us what to do. Well, yes, I am going to, because that's what Ikrar asked me to do. So let me start. This is historical. Ikrar mentioned a little bit growing up, those of you who are my age, I see some in the audience are, or older, or a little younger, would remember that back in the mid-60s, around 65, this is the variety Lamaroho 64A I couldn't find back in Punjab, which was introduced directly around 65. And that changed the whole face of that area in terms of agricultural revolution. That led to everything else, which is mechanical revolution, and then came the televisions and the motorbikes and the cars and you name it. So I lived through that. Before that, I remember we used to grow, I grew up at a small farm. I remember we used to grow this mixture of wheat and chickpeas. Got some good rains, you got good wheat. If you didn't get enough rain, you got good chickpeas. And there was a name for the mixture of wheat and chickpeas, bijad. And those of you who lived through that era in the 60s would remember that we used to also grind flour of wheat and chickpeas together, and that used to be referred to as bijad. Anyway, so this is long road from 64, Lamaroho 64A and Yukuraho 64A, two of the original contributions, introductions. And then came Kalyan Sona, the first indigenously bred variety. The Lawak Athwal was the head of the breeding at PAU Ludhiana back then. And he named the variety after his village, Kalyan. Sona means gold, so it's the gold of Kalyan. That was back when you could name a variety the way you wanted, and these days you have all these rules and regulations. And now all the way to current, this is Punjab 343, it came from Attila. And I'm sure Pakistan, you have your own variations of Attila. And this is what actually got Raja Ram the World Food Prize. So with that little background, I just want to tell you that I grew up at a farm doing first-hand agriculture. It was hard days. And I saw the transition, actually transformation from rain-fed agriculture to intensive agriculture. All the associated problems notwithstanding, like loss of water table and chemical poisoning of the soils whatsoever, that's for a different forum. So Awais Rashid, whom I got to know in China a couple of years ago, I asked him, what are the problems in Pakistan? And this is what he sent me. So I was surprised that wheat is big, actually quite big in Pakistan. I don't need to belabor this slide because it's everything, you guys know it. But the main thing is there's the underlined parts, which is Pakistan ranks fairly low comparatively in grain yield. And then the genetic gain, actually Awais listed 0.8. I'm gonna show you a couple of slides where I discuss this genetic gain part. And terminal heat stress rust disease, rust in particular has been very predominant in Pakistan lately. Actually, Ravi told me that that area, northwest all the way to northeast, has benefited from relatively cold weather, cool weather in the last few years. But in Pakistan, that benefit was negated by the rust problem. So there is something to consider. And Akara sent me this slide this morning, the problem slide, and it's obvious that production is not keeping up with the demand. So naturally, when such a sacrosanct crop as wheat, which is so central to the consumers as well as the farmers, there is a shortfall. It's going to send shock waves. So you are doing the right thing by organizing this kind of like at least discussion on this topic as to how to proceed. Again, Awais, what Awais sent was going back like 20 years, and Awais sent me, actually it's not as dire as I was made to believe and as I had thought. On the left is I re-plotted Awais's data. And you see this genetic, and I converted the yield to months, by the way, because I know you guys think in months, it's easier to imagine in your mind what a month is than than a ton or something. So anyway, so this is about 30 months these days, 29 to 30 months. And the genetic gain is right here. I mean, not genetic gain, you can call it yield gain over the years, over the last 10 or 12 years. And that's about 14 kilograms. You can multiply this 0.3 by 40 per year, per acre. And here's the global, on the right-hand side, global yield gain during the same period. And that's about, Pakistan's yield gain has been about 2/3 of the global gain. And one would expect that given how much agriculture is intensive in your area, that at least the yield to the global yield gain. And I think that's what we are discussing today. But again, this is not, like I said, as dire as I thought it was. I asked Ravi Prakash Singh, our distinguished breeder, and whose varieties, by the way, cover most of the globe, like 2 out of 3 varieties globally grown, they come from his program. And he's a stickler for these kind of things. People normally embellish data and try to show the positive stuff, and he's always kind of like worried, oh, we are not doing enough, and genetic gain is not good enough. But here they did a pretty, you can read on the right, I'm not gonna read everything, but if you want, I can. The bottom line is the data are quite rigorous over 5 years and multiple varieties. So here's the genetic gain, 0.6%, 0.6% per year under normal growing conditions, which is irrigated conditions, which is expected because you have a higher yield to start with. But the good thing, silver lining, is that under drought and heat, the genetic gain is higher, and that's where we are heading. So apparently the CIMMYT program has been more successful in accelerating the genetic gain, comparatively speaking, that is, under drought and heat stress, which are going to be big problems with climate change. It's already happening, by the way. Now, why yield, what and why? Potential yield in wheat, let's say potential yield is actually, it's context dependent, but it's yield in the absence of any stresses. So we don't know if there were stresses or not, but this is the recorded yield, maximum yield, so to say. Because in the USA, they have this, what's called competitive yield trials. So even if that's beginning to be, it used to be in maize, but now it's beginning to happen in wheat as well. So it's on average about 12 tons per hectare. Whereas the farm yield is about 3.5 tons per hectare. That's about 1/3, or a little less than 1/3, actually 27, 28% of the potential yield. And why this gap? Actually, this gap is not unexpected because the stresses like drought and heat and insects, diseases, I mean, they are the ones that pull the yield down. And Don Dubik used to say that breeders don't breed for yield, they breed against the stresses. So, and you are experiencing that despite that relatively cool weather, which should have been beneficial to wheat production, your wheat production has gone south because of the rust problem in the northern belt, at least, close to the foothills. So genetic gain, like I showed earlier from Ravi, that's about 0.6% at optimal and 0.9% at drought and heat. So these are just what's and whys of yield, and what are the tools to expedite breeding. High throughput phenotyping is one of them, remote sensing, for example, but is more the better. If you get megatons of data, if you can make sense of it, I mean, does it really help? Marker-assisted selection is that practical for a large breeding program, particularly in public breeding programs where the money is always in short supply. Genomic prediction and selection, it is not something new. It has been around for 20 years. I mean, would G/A interaction ever allow it to work as well as people have made it to look like? The other problem with that is that the prediction is based on the past results, not the future combinants. These are philosophical issues that need to be discussed in more detail, but I'm not going to get into those today. And speed breeding is another, it's not something new. It has been repackaged with modern technology like this LED lights and all that. We have known for ages. As a graduate student, I used to grow wheat in styrofoam cups and would make it, otherwise it would take 4 to 5 months for wheat to mature. And I could get in 6 to 8 weeks from planting to grain. So that's not something new, but it's kind of like out there. Breeding for stability across broad geographic areas or each target environment. This is something I want to say a word or two about. And I'm sure the breeders in the audience and the students in particular would know at Punjab Agricultural University, the stability breeding, Eberhard and Russell's regression of the genotypic mean on the environmental mean and so on and so forth selects the most stable lines. When I came to Pioneer, I discovered that they were doing the opposite. They were breeding for target environments instead of selecting for a variety that was broadly adapted. They were looking for the outliers that were adapted to certain regions. So their motto, their slogan has been the right product for right acres. So they split this broad target environment into smaller sub-environments. And there is something in there, although in public breeding programs, it's a challenge. I mean, the cost is an issue, but this is something to keep in mind. And hybrid wheat, cost benefit issue is there. I can discuss a lot about that, but I'm not going to talk about any of these today. I'm going to talk about something specific that Ikrar asked me to, where the biotechnology would be for 5 years from now. This is for the other experts. I'm just laying these out so that at the future fora, these issues could be discussed in detail in the context of improving genetic gain, particularly in Pakistan. And here is to continue with the tools to expedite breeding. Biotechnology is a great potential, particularly in herbicide tolerance and disease resistance. However, we all know what the perception of GMOs is. It's unlikely that a true transgenic GMO would see the light of the day sometime soon. Particularly European opposition and Japanese opposition has been notoriously strong. And in the USA, Monsanto did develop a herbicide tolerant wheat back in 2004. But then they shelved it because there wasn't enough money. They couldn't recover the cost of putting that trait in by selling the seed to the farmers at a premium. So that's a big issue from the corporation side, industry side, and then the farmers' cost and benefit ratio of those transgenics. And if and when it started in the USA, but here, majority of the wheat is grown on marginal land, so it's unlikely, at least in the near future. Actually, Monsanto also developed hybrid wheat with their glyphosate system, which I can discuss at some other forum. It's a beautiful system, it works, but the cost of seed production was so high that it exceeded the benefits that the farmers harvested at the end, 10 to 15% increased yield. So consumer opposition to GM wheat is another factor. Then, like I said, limited profit margin for the ag companies. But this gene editing has been around since the 80s. But the problem was the success rate, frequency was so notoriously low that industry didn't get into it. And there's a new technology, it's called CRISPR-Cas. I'm sure you have to work hard these days not to hear about that technology. That has completely changed that playing field. The frequency is so high that you can edit almost any gene. But at the end, this is what Ravi told me as well. This is somewhat disjointed, that when I asked him that because I want to check with independent sources what's going on, I said, why is the yield stagnant in Pakistan? He said, no, it's not stagnant. It's slower than average because the varietal replacement is an issue. So my friend in Pakistan, not Pakistan, of course, I haven't talked with him before this. They tell me that this varietal replacement is a major issue. And some people in southern Punjab are still growing varieties from the 80s. So there may be a significant yield product or gain production associated just with varietal replacement that doesn't require any new varieties. It just requires the extension sciences work, not the breeder's part. So boots on the ground, that's what it comes down to. So convincing farmers to replace the older varieties with the newer ones could bump up that production, wheat production in Pakistan. But that's again, I know there are lots of experts and specialists on this, but this is just one area that floated to the top, that if something as simple as varietal replacement could substantially increase production, then why shouldn't effort be spent on that rather than upstream, which is a lot more expensive and involves other costs. So I'm gonna just give you a brief overview how we can contribute from the biotechnology side over the next 5 years. So what we have decided is in a limited way. I mean, we are being humble. I am not promising anything earth-shaking or groundbreaking. So for example, one of the problems with these traits, for example, when disease resistance breaks down, what you see in this graph is Brandon Wolf and I wrote a commentary on Science a couple of years ago, that as we breed for higher and higher yield, we get rid of those genes that provide plant protection. That's what happens in the wild. Because all those wild plants, that's why they don't yield that high sometimes, because they maintain all those protection mechanisms in them. But in wheat, we get rid of them. And then when the resistance breaks down with one or the other gene, we have to go back to the original stock, which is wild accessions, to introduce new genes. Now that can take, those of you who are breeders in the audience would know, I mean, it's a long, drawn-out process. You have to back out. If you have the gene, you know the gene, then you can have a marker. You can reduce the time into half. But if you don't, then it's simple selection. You have to cross and select. So, but gene editing offers an alternative. Again, I don't want to belabor too much on this, but just to give you, because this is the catch. What I have, the route I have taken is do it directly in elite lines, not in experimental lines. I want to emphasize that again, that most of the geneticists and breeders and transformation people, they use the standard line that is amenable to transformation. Like in the wheat, there are 2 lines, Bob White and Fielder. They're 50-year-old lines. And whoever refuses to back off them or to cross them with any line, his elite line, he said he simply doesn't have the time, number one. Number two, even at the end, he's still left with enough of genetic drag, I'll show you in a moment, that he just is not going to do it. But if I could change a gene directly in the line, elite line, where resistance has broken down, that bypasses all this backcrossing and the issues of genetic and linkage drag. Here I have an example. For example, this is an exotic line with 1 gene that we want. And here's the elite line that's missing that gene. When you cross and back cross after BC4, you end up with something like that. You still have 3% of the donor genome. And that doesn't sound much, but when you look at the number of genes, that's 3,000 genes still of the donor genome, which is this feral genes, which are not good for the plant. So it comes in with linkage drag. That's what linkage drag is called. But with the gene editing, we precisely alter that gene, and then 2 outcrosses just to get rid of the transgenic component, and you are home. So here is an example actually from the horse's mouth directly. This is from Pioneer Corteva. So the same exact trait, waxy, it would take about 8 years to by conventional breeding. 42 months, approximately 1/3 of the time it took, or 40% of the time. So it's substantial time saving as well as resource saving exercise. And at CIMMET, we decided that we're going to just focus on helping the breeders. So this doable rust resistance, and I'm with the rust in particular in the northern belt, you guys know that, how much time do I have?
5 minutes to conclude.
Okay, 5 minutes is fine.
Yeah.
I didn't keep track in the beginning of when I started, so that's why I asked. Okay, so at CIMMET, we decided to help the breeders instead of starting because that's one of the things that happen to you when you work in the industry, that you always think of applications. And one thing we did in the industry was that unless a breeder was on the board and they wanted it. So the best thing to do is to talk with the breeder beforehand rather than after the fact. So I essentially camped in Ravi's office for almost 6 months when I went to CIMMET. And these are the issues we came up with, that doable rust resistance. So those of you who are not into this field, I apologize, just forgive me for a minute, but for the specialists, I wanna say that this race-specific resistance, it's tight, yes, vertical, but when it breaks down completely, and you have to start over again, bring in new genes. And that I mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, backcrossing is time-consuming and resource-consuming thing. But there's an alternative. There are 3 genes or QTLs, 1 QTL, 2 genes, LR34, LR46, and LR67. They are called durable rust resistance genes. So when these genes are present, they do not block pathogen growth completely, but they block it enough that the yield loss is not nearly as high as in the susceptible genotypes. Actually, it's not even noticeable. So MLO is a powdery mildew. It's coming back. I hear, at least in the eastern Punjab, in the foothills, it's already beginning to show up. Here is an example. On the left, you see in the back, this is where the gene is lacking, LR34 this is. But on the right, the same line with that gene present. It's just a single gene. So these are, without getting into too much detail, and there's a new gene, LR67, that has been cloned, but it is present in a very, very old accession. And I asked Ravi if he was gonna stack it on top of it. He said, no, I can't do it. It's just in an old accession, and he doesn't have the resources to do it. So we started with that, since LR34 and LR46 are already there in elite germplasm. This is the one that's lacking. So we picked the elite line, Prevailing, bowl of 100. This is not the elitist line, but a couple of years ago, it was elite. And we have enabled its transformation. This is just to show you, I don't want to get into details, but the point is that we can edit this gene from a susceptible copy to a resistant copy directly in Prevailing. So all this leads to what? Accelerated breeding. Our objective is to help the breeders reach their end goals faster. So reconstitution of, I'm recapitulating what I have said earlier, reconstitution of original genetic background of backcrossing is time consuming, and there's always some linkage drag associated with that. Editing genes directly in the late lines, that certainly would help. And the good thing about that is that future edits could be easily stacked onto previous ones. And at CIMMET, we are beginning, we have obtained transgenics, we are screening. It's interesting in a way that we just kind of like got the first set of, like a couple of months ago, transgenic plants, and we are screening them right now for editing, if the gene has been edited. And in the future, we intend to expand this program to improve biofortification in the wheat grains. Now, I just want to say finally that in maize, we are way far ahead than in wheat. Part of the reason is that we are collaborating with Corteva, and we have their vectors for maize transformation. So in the maize, we have already obtained confirmed edited events, and that project is funded by the Gates Foundation. Wheat, I'm still bootlegging. I'm using mainly CRP funds, although I have been feverishly looking for money to do this work, just to keep something on. With that, I think I'll stop and I'll take questions.
Okay, Kamarpal, thank you very much. We'll take the questions at the end, and let me move on to Dr. Kulvinder Gill.
Okay, let me stop sharing then. Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Gill.
Yes, I'm here.
That's even more prettier. So you are sitting on me.
That's virtual. Just
Please go ahead.
okay. All right.
Need to go to first slide. Okay, now. Whether we can't hear you, are you talking?
Oh, you can't? Yes, I think I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, all right. So, well, thank you so much, Dr. Khan, for this opportunity. And what I will do today is sort of address the question that was posed to me by sort of giving specific examples, what we are trying to do to address some of those issues. And I will be talking on behalf of Washington State University, as well as the company, our company, Gene Shifters. So we are just sort of doing things in collaboration, and then you will see the logo. When you see WSU logo, that is WSU work, and when you see Gene Shifters logo, that's Gene Shifters work. So with that, Kamarpal did a good job sort of highlighting the same point, what I'm trying to make here, but I'll give it a little different spin. So the potential and realized yield, there's a massive gap. And then depending upon, yeah, Kamarpal presented 3.5, I'm saying 3 tons, depending upon which number you take. But the point still stays the same, that we are harvesting about 1/3 of what the variety is capable of yielding. And what are we doing? Our focus is still on increasing the yield potential rather than trying to close this gap. So again, although we use numbers of 10 years to 15 years, but many of the crosses, when we see, they take much longer than that. And it's a very, very expensive process. A lot of time people say, oh, the marker work is expensive, the molecular work. No, the breeding is very expensive, right? And then you spend 10, 15 years, and then you just look around how many varieties have been released and how many varieties are farmers growing. Maybe 1 in 20 is actually successful. What's going on there, right? And many of those varieties are not grown just because of a single gene that just becomes susceptible, and then no one is growing those. So what we have been kind of focusing on over the last maybe 10 plus years, that let's not worry about yield potential. There's plenty potential there. The day we reach close to 9 tons, I would worry about the yield potential. Right now, let's just focus on protecting what we are losing on daily basis. So we have been absolutely focused on just the yield protection part. And I personally believe that we need a paradigm shift in breeding process. So this is kind of what we are. This is very rough. It is very difficult to get these numbers right, but it's not really going to make much difference if it is 50% or 60%. We are losing to diseases as well as abiotic stresses. And alien species are a rich source. And Kaurpal talked about this gene editing, and that's a wonderful technology. But in wheat, we have very, very few genes that we can edit. So for that, identifying each gene cost quite a bit effort and time. And once that is done, then the editing become really wonderful. So in the interim, we are focusing on using genes that are present in alien species and trying to find good ways to quickly transfer those into varieties. And that's kind of where we are in. And I will just use sort of a quick specific examples to sort of make my same points. And this is work where we are talking about dwarfing gene. This is a busy slide. I'll try to cut the technical part of it. But just going back to pre-green level revolution, I don't need to go there. We know the 6 feet tall varieties. If in a good year, it will fall flat. And then it's just the green revolution came by. And I just want to set the record straight. WSU has a lot to do with that. The very first dwarf variety was developed at WSU by Dr. Bogle called Gaines. And that Gaines variety was later taken to all over the world to bring about what we today know as green revolution. And how did that happen? It was because of a single mutation in a GA pathway. Don't worry about that. It's just a very important hormone. And that hormone is very important for plant growth. We all know the importance of hormones for humans, for plants. And what did we do? We made the plant insensitive to GA. And later on, we found out GA is supercritical for abiotic stresses. So these are just some of, not all, some of the drawbacks of currently used RHT mutants that are present in more than 90% of the world wheat. It's a major bottleneck. Why do people don't know about the negative side of those? Because they're present in all varieties. There's no comparison. I mean, Europeans have used a different ones in at least some breeding programs, the RHT8, and that contrast is pretty obvious. So there are a lot of negatives, and our focus was to develop a better way to dwarf plant, because we must still have dwarf wheat plant. And this is just a data showing here, the first one, RHT1 and 2, are the tall varieties, and these are single gene or 2 gene under heat and drought. And as you can see, with the single gene and 2 gene, the yield even under irrigated condition is lower. And this is an exact same background. So it's not gotten from other sources, and this is our gene shifters work. And so what we did, to cut long story short, instead of using the same dwarf gene all over the world, we have developed series of different dwarfing mutants specifically targeted for different wheat growing conditions. Like for example, for under irrigated, we have a different gene. Under rain fed, we have a different gene. And now we have these genes. And just this is one example. These are 3 lines with the stars are the wheat lines that these dwarf mutants we have developed. And this is under our drought tolerance screen. And then the plants that are dead on the right or dying, those are all currently grown varieties. And these, the ones with the stars, are in the same background. So we are pretty convinced that these are working. Now we are just systematically transferring or replacing existing RHTs with these, starting with the US. Now we have taken this project to Egypt. We are trying to replace RHTs from Egyptian background with these, and then slowly moving to the rest part of the world. So our goal is that we want to get rid of RHT1 and 2. And we also found a dwarf mutant that gives clear advantage in salt stress. And I know how much problem salt stress is already causing in Pakistan, and this problem is getting worse. So we have some dwarf mutants, the one with the stars. They have tremendous potential to provide salt stress tolerance. And just quickly, this is something very close to my heart. There's tremendous amount of funding going into Rust Initiative. I think if I may be wrong, but close to 90 million from Gate Foundation has gone into Rust Initiative. And today, Rust is raising havoc all over the world. It's not only Pakistan problem, it's not only Indian problem, it is US problem, Canadian problem, European problem, it's all over, right? We have 65 resistant genes at hand. When you look around, very, very few varieties are really resistant. And so what we are doing is learning from the success. Those of you who may remember Bob McIntosh in Australia, when he was in charge, I don't think they had any rust epidemic because he was so particular which gene will be deployed where. And then we are planning on following very similar strategy. That is, we have identified 19 novel resistant sources. These have not been used in breeding program yet. And some are from wild, some are from cultivated, some are from these land races. And we don't select anything that does not give immune response. We are not interested in the sort of partial resistance. Yes, the durable resistance is very critical. We are trying to select out of these that give immune as well as durable. So that's kind of because those examples do exist in barley and other crops. So we think that that is possible in wheat as well. And our plan is that to deploy these strategically starting from Ethiopia all the way to Nepal to create barriers all along the way so that in case one of those break down and then the others will protect the crop. And also we are working on developing a system to detect new races early, and then we could have a new variety ready by the time that comes. It is a big project. We went after USAID. The discussions are ongoing. Hopefully we will manage to convince them this is something good for them to invest maybe $10 million or something. But we are pushing on this project regardless. And this is again, Gene Shifters project that I'm talking about. And then the third example I'll talk about is what I said earlier, the genes present in alien species. That's a tremendous rich source, evolved over millions of years. And then while we discover more genes and then take that into gene editing stage, let's just try to use this resource. And then our lab at WSU been working on this gene for a long time. Won't bore you with this. This is the gene that make wheat fertile, although it is polyploid, but I'll just sort of skip that detail. A few years ago, we cloned this gene, and now we are trying to use that gene to transfer genes from wild relatives into crops. So what did we do? Just for one example, this chromosome from rye 1RS, that is present in many of the very high yielding wheats around the globe. And in our part, that is the state of Washington, this chromosome arm has not been used because it comes with the negative effects on grain quality. But it is well-known fact that this arm from rye is very important for yield and other abiotic stresses and all. So we thought, let's just try to break this arm because we don't need complete arm. We only want part of it. So we use our new method with the new gene. And what you see on the right, the extreme right 3 lanes are what you normally expect. A wheat chromosome or Y chromosome will never pair. So once you transfer the complete arm from Y, it will stay as one unit. But we managed to break that using this method. So here on this slide, green is wheat, red is rye. And then what I'm showing, each panel is one particular line that we have developed. You can see how many small pieces from rye have been transferred. And now we are systematically eliminating unwanted, and then we plan to just only retain a small segment from rye and nothing else in wheat background. And now we are using this in citrus. That's so now this patent is with the company. So we are transferring this technology to soybean, corn, and just getting into citrus, because this greening problem is a huge problem in the citrus industry in the US. And then so we believe that this technology will work in pretty much all crop plants. And then this is just we showed that this works in Arabidopsis as well. It's the easiest thing to do. So that was kind of helped us convince others that if it worked in Arabidopsis, it probably work in other dicots also. And very quickly about our ongoing project to develop heat-tolerant wheat cultivars that is targeted for Southeast Asia, especially India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh. Those are sort of the main targets of this project. It is a pretty large project, these specific objectives, but the main objective under all this is to develop heat-tolerant wheat varieties. Remember that we are talking 5-year project, and we managed to convince USAID that yes, we can develop varieties from across to farmers' field in 5 years. We have successfully done that, and then that's kind of our benchmark that from the start to finish, we want seed on farmer's field in 5 years. That's kind of what we try to do. And what we did for this project, we chose not to do GMO. Kaur Paul explained it really well, why that is not a good strategy if you want your seed to be on farmer's field. So we tapped into natural variation, collected germplasm from all over the world, Africa, wherever, and then developed 5 of our own screening methods. Look at this temperature, 40 degrees Celsius. These plants we selected, especially the one on the left, these when grown at 40 degrees Celsius throughout, except for germination, from seedling to maturity, and these plants look pretty happy. So we identified these type of plants. There's a lot of work going on in this, but this is kind of the current status, that we identified 9 tolerant donors, something like that can tolerate 40 degrees Celsius, although that wheat plant is rarely exposed to 40 degree, but we really want to test that. Most of the varieties currently grown die at that condition. So when we test those at 40 degrees Celsius, either they totally die or maybe set 1 or 2 seeds. But these plants, they just look very happy. And we have identified 19 such lines. They have complementary mechanism of heat stress. So once we develop these, we can combine those into a single line and further increase heat tolerance. As I said, that the main objective is to develop varieties. So 35 of these lines, these are release candidates, are being tested at 8 locations in India and Nepal, and 2 have been selected in Bihar for release, well, potential release, and others are selecting these lines are looking pretty good. So we are confident by the time we are done with this, we will have some varieties on the farmer's field. And then I'll just say maybe few things only about this fast breeding. This is not the speed breeding Kaur Paul talked about. When I say fast breeding, that is when we start with the cross and have seed sold to farmers. If we can do it in 5 years, that is speed breeding or fast breeding for me. So it is from cross to seed on farmer's field is what I call fast breeding. And we sort of developed proof of concept at Washington State University. released 3 varieties. Those are all 3 very successful, currently very successfully grown in the state. And then we totally came up with a new method of much refined version of that at the Gene Shifters. And our first product will be commercialized this year. That was developed in about 3.5 years. So last year was an initial seed increase year. So we expect that to be sold either this year, at least the foundation seed will be sold this year, if not. So that's kind of, so we don't, anytime rebreeding takes more than 5 years, that's not what we call fast breeding. So we are totally invested in fast breeding method. So just these are the 3 varieties that are at Washington State that we developed, and they're doing pretty well. I try to kind of do it in a short time so that I leave more time for discussion and questions. And with that, thank you very much. And then we'll participate more in the discussion.
Thank you, Kulwinder. Very good overview. Now we move on to our discussants, and I will first request Dr. Abud Mahmood, DG Research, for his comments. Abud.
Yes. Actually, the presentations, earlier presentations were very nice, and they elaborated in a very good way about the progress being made in wheat. Actually, in Pakistan particularly, what we are feeling that in most of the countries and in Pakistan, we are developing wheat varieties by using high inputs, or I would say in our terms, we use it recommended dose of fertilizer. But most of our farmers in Pakistan, in India, in Bangladesh, in many developing countries, our farmers could not use the fertilizer up to the mark which is recommended. For this purpose, we have started a program where we are screening our material for for low input. If, for example, if a variety which is giving, for example, a yield with a recommended or high dose of fertilizer as is being given in the USA or in Europe and other countries. But if a variety which give little bit low yield, then and using less fertilizer, we are looking for the genes of in the wheat which can give a reasonable yield with low fertilizer requirements, so that our farmers, small farmers which are not using much fertilizer, they can get a reasonable yield with this. I would recommend that in the projects, in the international projects, as were being discussed, that in some projects funded by USAID and other this funding agencies, and this Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh are the part of these projects. Here we should also work on the genetically the varieties of wheat and rice and other crops which can give a reasonable yield with the low fertilizer. Similarly, the other problem in our countries, as has been already discussed with by my previous speakers, that rust is becoming a very a serious problem in all over the world, particularly in Pakistan, because we were using our varieties were resistant to yellow rust, brown rust, stem rust, and we were traditionally not using any fungicide in all over the country to control these rusts. But last year and this year, our old varieties, they become, the rust incidence was so high that our farmers, use some fungicide as well. But even then, our new varieties, which were developed during last 2-3 years, they were still, resistant to some extent to these rusts, and farmer did not spray on their crops. The farmers who sown these new varieties. What my point is this, that in the developing countries, we should develop varieties with which have horizontal resistance for rust, so that our farmers, as they are even not using much fertilizer, they can raise their crop without this fungicide spray. Similarly, drought is another problem, and in our countries now, and terminal heat, because crop mature in the month of April traditionally, but now our crops are, due to climate change in Pakistan for the last 2 years, wheat crop is being mature in end of April and in May. So the temperature become very high, and for this purpose we are also trying to screen our material for terminal heat. And in the international this collaborative projects, this type of screening, and if somebody knows some genes which can be incorporated for this terminal heat, we should incorporate, because in our climate, Pakistan, India, the temperature become very high, even in the month of March, and we have to develop some varieties which is similarly another area which I think that for the hybrid wheat. In many countries, and they are working on hybrid wheat, as in case of rice, they have developed hybrid rice. But I think in wheat, we are, little bit behind as compared to rice. So if we can, develop some hybrid wheat, this will also be helpful for the to increase the per unit area of yield. Similarly, in Pakistan, our wheat research institutes, they are working on the nutritional enhancement of wheat, particularly for zinc and iron. They were part of Harvest Plus project, and we also have some projects from Punjab government, from Punjab Agriculture Research Board, and some other sources. And we now become, able to develop a variety which will be, approved for general cultivation next year. They have a significantly higher zinc and iron as compared to the existing varieties. Similarly, the productivity enhancement, as earlier speakers mentioned, in our countries, especially in Pakistan, after the green revolution, our pace of genetically, incorporation of genes for high yield was not, very promising. For the last about 15 to 20 years in Pakistan, our yield is you can say, stagnant with one, one quintal or 2 quintal, variation as compared to, the old varieties. But now our yield is not increasing. But I think that, as I mentioned these few points, if we can, with the collaboration of this USAID and other projects, they can help Pakistan, India, and these countries to enhance our yield, because now in the next years, if yield remain the same as still for the last 10 to 20 years, it will be very difficult to feed the growing population of the country. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Mahmood. We will move on to Dr. Buttar now. Dr. Buttar, please recall Dr. Kamarpal Dugab mentioned that in Pakistan we are harvesting about 2/3 of the local potential, but he also told us that we are harvesting about 3, whereas the global potential is 12. And he made a special mention of variety replacement, and he pointed out to weakness of extension. So please try to address the audience where we are headed in terms of variety replacement. Of course, the genetics and the variety improvement will continue, but variety replacement is the current challenge. Over to you, Dr. Anjum Ali Buttar.
Fakhar Imam here. Can I just say a word?
Sir, please go.
Dr. Sahab, I have another meeting at 9 o'clock, so I'll take, after Dr. Buttar has finished, I'll take 5 to 7 minutes to make my input, and then I have to leave, Ji.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Ji, Buttar sir, be quick. Buttar sir, unmute yourself and go ahead. Anjum Ali Buttar.
Karar, the host, you can unmute him.
Unmute hai, so there is a problem with your sound. Buttar Sahib. Okay, I think we have difficulty in getting Buttar Sahib. So maybe we can move straight to Sayyid Fakhr Imam. Sir, over to you. Sayyid Fakhr Imam, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iqrar Ahmed Khan Sahib. I am extremely grateful to you and your colleagues for having organized this very elaborate talk on the wheat, specifically that how we can increase our wheat yields. Basically, this is, I think, the whole purpose of this exercise. And I must say that I enjoyed listening to all the three speakers from their own perspective. The two gentlemen representing Summit and Washington State University were really giving out their whole themes and theses in line with research practitioners, research policies, and a futuristic policy. The thing about wheat, and we saw a quick snippet of the pre-green revolution, which was that the wheat stocks were high, and they would lodge very easily. And I think that was the paradigm shift brought about by Dr. Norman Borlaug, where he had these dwarf varieties, which is the essence of the modern technology in the last 50 to 60 years, which changed the whole paradigm, that with more irrigation, depending on the type of soil and availability of water, and the application of fertilizer and the right mix of fertilizer optimized and maximized yields per unit area. We in the subcontinent, I think, till the 1964-65 revolution, were constantly looking at arrival of ships at our ports to be shipped up country by trains and other transport, where there was always fear of semi-famine conditions. And in 1943 in Bengal, there was a famine when World War II, the ships were diverted to Burma. So that was, I think, at the back of the mind. But since 43, because of the production, whether within the countries or outside, and more importantly, the distribution system has allowed us that our people have received the quota of wheat. But what in essence interests me most of all is the quality of breeding, the mechanics of breeding, and the cultivars that they have mentioned. And then they mentioned in particular the new dwarfing genes under different conditions. In particular, in countries like Pakistan, we now suffer from, at times because of this climate change, water shortages off and on. And then we also have drought. Hello? We suffer also from drought conditions, but it sort of intrigues me that the minimum of really bringing about significant change in the wheat varieties for commercial use is a minimum of 5 years. So these are long-term trends, these are long-term investments of, as I said, scholars, practitioners, and people who understand the mechanism of the germplasm. It was stated that there are about 662 by one of our speakers of world cultivars that are available. And the germplasm, which is with each country and the research people, I think in the long term really matters a lot. And for Pakistan, in the last 2 years, as Dr. Abid Mahmood has pointed out, that rust, whether it's yellow, whether it's brown, whether it's stem rust, has impacted, especially I think this particular crop that we had harvested. Our target was 27 million tons. And because of the climate change and because of the incidence of rust, and where the fungicides sometimes were used, at times they were not used, we did have lower production by approximately 1.4 million tons. That from our actually targeted of the 27 million, we got about 25.5 million tons. So this is one element that we have. And then that the farmers or growers of wheat in our parts of the world have less cash available, capital available to invest in higher inputs was also mentioned, and that the evolving breeding, the evolving bringing about the kind of dwarf varieties which are heat tolerant, which are drought tolerant, but at the same time with less input of fertilizer, perhaps can give reasonable, the word used was reasonable, yields per hectare or per unit area. Now this is I think this is the main challenge that we face. But I'm also seeing there are niche growers, a small number as yet, who have actually gone into organic farming. Now I'm just raising this as a one element of what people are doing globally, and even in Pakistan, I know there's a whole group of farmers who have gone in for what they call organic farming, where minimum of chemical fertilizer is being applied, and perhaps pesticides also. I say minimum because I'm not sure how much, if at all, any they're using, but according to them, they are trying to change into this. I mean, this is perhaps a futuristic thing, but ultimately we see in the Western markets that crops or edible products which are grown under organic conditions have a slightly higher price for the consumer. So this is one element which was not mentioned. I thought I just raised that issue. But what attracts me is that this, despite the fact that we really have not been able to maintain in the last 2 decades any kind of a systematic increase in our wheat yield, and it's the most important crop for us, not just for food security, because it takes up nearly 35–36% of our total cropped area. So even 1 mond per acre of higher yield would add in terms of value to our economy, but also then allow us to use that land, which when you have high yields, then you can convert some of that land to other higher value crops. Pakistan has been constantly looking at this in our commission reports, in our policy reports. We have been looking at this. Now we have to put it into action. And this is the challenge that I feel that somebody like me, who has come into this food security responsibility, that, and with research which is being done by our institutions, both at the federal and our provincial levels, this is the big challenge. How can we, given climate change, drought conditions, and changes in temperatures, heat, especially it was mentioned, we have irrigated, non-irrigated areas. How do we really optimize our real production in terms of what the actual farmer gets? Because the way this whole regime at CIMET, at Washington State universities, our own universities in Pakistan, we have 5 or 6 of them, and then we have a large setup of our own federal system of genetic engineering, as well as in our provincial institutions of research, and we have some highly qualified, very committed, and I think people with a long-term view, and they realize that if we can somehow change the whole technology of our genomes and the manner we can change the whole outlook with the right genetic engineering of back crossing, and then bringing about, and then selection, and then seeing how those cultivars will react under different conditions. I think we in Pakistan, especially given that in the last 2 years we have not really been able to meet our production targets, it is very necessary and very imperative that we in Pakistan somehow bring about another paradigm shift. I know it's very difficult. We perhaps have not had a Dr. Norman Borlaug. We did have, I think the gentleman's name was Dr. S.A. Qureshi, I recall, much man who was paid great tribute by the people, that he was one who brought in the change in our culture of our wheat production at one time. We need that. I know that Dr. Ikrar, a person of your standing, your stature, Dr. Abid Mahmood, who is heading our research, and Dr. Buttar, all 3 of you, in your different capacities, I have known you, and I know you in your working relationship, in the way that the kind of leadership that you give in the institutions that you head. This is the quality, and this is the direction. And we need to give our people in the fields who are out there in the heat who are out there working with the soil, who are sustaining this population of 220 million. It's a great tribute to the farmers, to the growers community, led by your excellence in scientific skills in the way that transfer of technology. Yes, in the past we have been helped a great deal by these institutions, but now the Chinese factor has come in. China transition that hybrid rice, for instance, have done, other hybrid crops have done. I think this is one of the very big challenges that the scientists face, the researchers face, that we need a hybrid wheat, which will add value in the way that the transition that took place from the pre-green revolution to the post-green revolution. If we can somehow bring about that hybrid wheat, in my opinion, we will have made the paradigm shift. Thank you very much indeed.
Sir, thank you very much. We are honored. You have set the stage up. Inshallah, we will have this weekly events. And by the way, on hybrid wheat, we are already scheduled to have Dr. Richard from University of Sydney on the 29th of August. So I'll keep you updated, sir. Thank you very much for your time. You have been very gracious, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciated the scholarly research product that hopefully will help the people of Pakistan and raise our production not too far in the future to 30 million tons. Thank you so very much.
Yes, sir. Ji, Buttar sahab, over to you. Buttar sahab.
Okay. Yes, it's clear.
Please go ahead. You have heard the questions I posed that Dr. Kamarpal Dugga thinks that our extension is weak. We are unable to replace the varieties, even though the genetic potential will continue to grow. The disease resistance, the heat and drought, the breeders are doing a wonderful job, but the varieties grown by the farmer are still very old and susceptible. So you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I must acknowledge the presentations from Dr. Dugga and Dr. Gill and the very wise words from the Sayyid Fakhr Imam Shah. Stagnation in yields can be addressed through the biotechnology, information technology and mechanization. And when we talk about the wheat, yes, we have the wheat stagnation problems, but we have a number of factors starting from the seedbed preparation, the seed selection to the harvesting. And now we are having the climate change as the biggest problem. Temperature, rainfall, and the disease problem is actually aggravating every year. And this is basically will be addressed through the genetically manipulation of the varieties. First, I will talk about the seed replacement. This is true that the requirement of seed in Pakistan is over 1 million ton, but we are not producing the seed from whole of the seed sector more than 200,000 tons. This is mean that we are producing 20% of the total seed production. And out of the 20% seed production, our replacement rate in Punjab province is not more than 17%. And what we are replacing is another question. If we have to backward linkage the total seed production system, and then from seed production system to the National Coordination Program of wheat, and then from the National Coordination Program to the import of the germplasm, we will keep the things correct. This is basically the high time to discuss on these things. That's with the start of the import of germplasm from the CIMET, we are importing over 4,000 lines annually. And we are spreading these lines to the institutes but our breeding programs is, I think, is not addressing according to the requirements, because if we see the history of the varietal release in Pakistan, we have so far released over 170 varieties. The SWIFT over 50 or 55 or 60 varieties in the last 10 years. The bombardment of the varieties is basically hampering the seed replacement program in Pakistan. We are releasing the huge number of varieties. Nobody even think about the name of these varieties. Some of the varieties, mega varieties, everybody know, but the number is very huge. Now we have to see that we have to develop our pre-breeding programs. Our pre-breeding programs for the gene pyramiding is missing in our basic institutes. We have to get the varieties or the lines or the cultivars imported from the exotic system, develop the pre-breeding programs, then with the gene pyramiding, shift to the institutes, and then from the import to the BNS program, we have to monitor through the complete tracking system each and every situation and every stage, so that we must know that the seed development program is going on through a certified system, and then from the BNS seed to the certified seed. If you see, look into the BNS seed system and then to the certified system, there are many lapses. And then the seed regulation programs in Pakistan, where the seed tagging and the seed certification is also another problem. I think this is a good forum where we have to discuss about the seed replacement program at the top priority. We have at the moment a National Agriculture Emergency Program, wherein we have distributed 432,432,000 bags last year, and this year we will be replacing 1.2 million bags. My humble submission to the seed corporation and other seed companies that we want the varieties, new varieties seed which is resistance, because rust is now ruining our cropping system. We have seen rust over almost significant area, 4.4 million acres of wheat crop was sprayed last year by the farmers. And this is a huge issue. The climate shift, another issue, because we are facing the rains in the month of March and April, and we are facing the low temperatures or the dryness in the month where we were expecting the rain. That climate shift, the rust problem is basically will be dealt through the breeding. Spring breeding is another issue, which the northern area of the country have no spring breeding issues, and more is the short duration of the varieties, because the wheat is being planted into the kharif crops, either in rice or in cotton. We have a very short window of wheat. That's why the short duration varieties fit in the cropping system with the proper fortified with the pre-breeding programs, having the proper genes with a tinge of biotechnology or the Casper Cras or the new sciences available that can improve the gene barrier, because 1.2 ton or 1.3 ton or 1.5 ton per acre production is no production. From 2000 to today, we are stagnant, and we usually increase our yield by expansion in the area. If you see that we expanded from 16 million acres to 17 million acres, and now we are again moving back to 16 million acres. And when we are backing to the 16 million acres, our harvesting is not more than 19.5 million ton. By increasing to 20 million ton, we have to expand the area, but we can't afford. Our soil health problems and many mechanization problems and line sowing or the phosphatic use or weed control or critical time of irrigation or other issues. But my submission is to break the gene, break the production potential with the gene manipulation, with the breeding. If we increase the breeding and make the replacement with the quality seeds, then we will achieve that target of at least 32 months to 33 months, because at the moment we have this year we have 32. If we go by 1 month or 2 months in next 2 years, we will be having less than 20 million ton. Then 20 million ton is the benchmark for the Punjab from 16 million acres. And that will be possible with the first seed replacement, the second, the proper agronomy at the farmer's field by having the good quality of phosphatic fertilizers and weedicides, or the mechanization, and above all is the complete overhauling, tracking, monitoring of the seed production programs through the National Coordination Program. Because of a National Coordination Program based in the Pakistan Agriculture Research Council is not appreciable. Starting from the Islamabad up to the lowest rank in the seed system, we have to review our system and improve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Buttar. I'm seeing Gurdesi Saab. So Gurdesi Saab, I think before I open it for Q&A, I would like to hear from you, sir, your comments. Gurdesi Saab. Sanjania Gurdesi. Sir, unmute yourself. Sir, unmute yourself. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
First of all, I must appreciate the initiative you have taken. And I think with this discourse, if we regularly conduct, we can really do something good for agriculture. And I joined very late, and today is the first time I'm joining it, and I'm just listening today. And inshallah, I'll be contributing in the next meetings.
Thank you, sir. Okay, now the forum is open for Q&A. I will first like Khalid Khokar to speak. Khokar sir, feel free, Urdu, Punjabi, jo marzi bolo.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी. हेलो
जी खोकर
जी,
साहब
डॉक्टर साहब मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
आ रही है जी, आ रही है.
अच्छा जी, डॉक्टर साहब थैंक यू वेरी मच जी, बहुत शुक्रिया. डॉक्टर साहब हमारे पाकिस्तान में इस वक्त जो सबसे ज्यादा जो चीज स्ट्रीमलाइन करने वाली है वो है सीड सेक्टर को, पूरे सेक्टर को, चाहे वो वीट में हो, कॉटन में हो, किसी चीज में हो. और अभी जो बुट्टर साहब बता रहे थे कि हम टोटल जो सर्टिफाइड सीड इस्तेमाल करते हैं वो 20% है. हमें कम से कम उस पर 60-80% पे जाना पड़ेगा. उसके बगैर मुमकिन नहीं. हमें अपने सीड सेक्टर को बेहतर करना होगा, सीड टेक्नोलॉजी बेहतर लानी होगी, और खुसूसन पंजाब में जो हमारी पंजाब सीड कॉर्पोरेशन है उसको अपग्रेड करना होगा, क्योंकि उसको अपग्रेड किए बगैर मुमकिन नहीं है कि हम तरक्की कर सकें. और इस दफा जो रस्ट ने हमारा बुरा हशर किया है, जिसकी वजह से हमारी पैदावार काफी ज्यादा कम हुई है, रस्ट को शुरू से कंट्रोल करना पड़ेगा. और अगले साल हमें एक्सटेंशन सर्विस को इसके लिए और ज्यादा फाल करना पड़ेगा, एक्सटेंशन इसके लिए, रस्ट के लिए. इस दफा भी एक्सटेंशन ने अपना रोल अदा किया है, लेकिन काफी लेट जाके अदा किया है, क्योंकि इसको बहुत पहले करना चाहिए था. ये तकरीबन हमारे पास को जनवरी में रस्ट आना शुरू हो गई थी. आज काश्तकार के दुनिया के मुकाबले में क्योंकि हमारी पैदावार बहुत कम है, उसके लिए हमें जदीद टेक्नोलॉजी की तरफ जाना पड़ेगा, बेहतर सीड लाना पड़ेगा. उसके बगैर क्योंकि इस वक्त हमारी कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन भी पूरी नहीं हो रही, और आज हमारी कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन दुनिया से कहीं ज्यादा है. अगर हमारी पैदावार बढ़ जाए तो कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन ऑटोमेटिकली कम हो जाएगी. तो मैं इसमें यही गुजारिश करूंगा कि हमारे साइंसदान इस पे जो काम कर रहे हैं उन्हें चाहिए कि और बेहतर हमें बेहतर सीड दें जिसकी पैदावार ज्यादा हो। हमारी अब जो पर एकड़ पैदावार है वो मैक्सिमम मेरे ख्याल में ऑन एवरेज जो आती है वो 30-31 मन है मैक्सिमम, और दुनिया 60-70 मन में चली गई है। अगर हम ये गैप अपना 50% पे भी ले जाएं, 40-45 पे चले जाएं, तो मेरे ख्याल में हमें ना गंदम इंपोर्ट करने में हमें कोई इशू नहीं होगा। थैंक यू सर।
At the chat box, there are questions. Dr. Anjum Bhatt has pointed out that we have to, move into using nano fertilizers. Sir, we will have a separate session for fertilizers. This one is focused on genetics and seed technology. And then there is a question by Zaheeb Asif asking what is the future of transgenic technology. I will ask the panelists to speak about that. Dr. Duga has made a brief comment on that. We will revert to him again. Kamarpal, can you explain a little bit about limitations that we have with transgenic technology?
Okay. Okay. We don't have limitations actually. Limitation is not with the technology. Limitation is with the customer, which is the farmers, the consumers, and on top of that, the governments. And mainly from very stiff opposition from Europe and also to some extent Japan, but Europe is a major consumer of wheat. It hasn't been possible to make headway into that. Other than that, this rust problem, now I can mention that you gave me this opportunity. There's a small company called Two Blade Foundation. It's not a company, it's kind of like a non-profit organization, UK-based. They have produced this transgenics with up to 10 race-specific genes. And that provides bulletproof resistance to majority of us. And they have 2 separate 10-gene constructs, and they have been trying to talk us into pushing them forward, but without seeing a reasonable path to farmers' field. CIMMYT does not have the resources to invest, because even getting a single gene deregulated in developing countries has been a challenge, a huge challenge. And even in other crops like this non-food crops like cotton, for example. And once you get the food crops, you know the way the situation is. You know, India, I'm sure you have been keeping an eye on India. BT brinjal was an example. And then rice is still up and down. So the problem is not that we cannot do it. It can be done. But the problem is with the regulatory agencies in the developing countries. And developing countries do not have mature enough of regulatory infrastructure. So they develop on what happens in the West. And from the West, they rely more upon what Europe says, which is a naysayer, than what the US says. And that has underlying reasons which I don't want to get into those polemics. But the answer to your question is that it's not a problem with technology, it's a problem with acceptance of technology. And to be direct and honest, I don't know if I should say it, but I see it unlikely that any of the developing countries will take a lead in allowing those 10-gene constructs, even single gene constructs, to go to the farmers' field. The problem is it's deeply rooted, because the issue is this, that if some country allows it, like Bangladesh is pretty, let's say, aggressive, and the problem is not only with that country, the problem is with the dissemination of the transgenic seed, the stewardship issue. Stewardship is the biggest issue, particularly in developing countries. It's not properly dealt with, which means you control the transgenic seed completely. I'm sure you remember the example. If you don't, I'll tell you. A few years ago, Monsanto had stopped working on this glyphosate-tolerant wheat back in 2004. And they put all the seed in a storage with a third party, not themselves. And somehow that seed appeared in Oregon fields. And it turned out later on, Monsanto complained to USDA that it was not their fault. It was the storage company's fault, and somebody sabotaged it. Somebody stole the seed from the board and planted it in the field. So those are the liability issues that come with it. So it's a complicated issue. So realistically, I think this gene-edited products, even they are facing resistance. For those of you who don't know, Pioneer Corteva, my former employer, they had developed this waxy corn as a proof of principle, just to test the waters. And in the USA, it's allowed. The USDA has made it very clear that if the change you make already occurs in nature and there's no transgenic component, you don't need approval for that. It's a deregulated trade already. But then came the decision from the European Court, which said that no, all gene-edited products are to be considered as transgenic. And that put a kibosh on this Corteva's product, and they have not planted a single acre of that wheat in the field, in farmer's field, not because it's not approved in the USA, just if it's planted in the USA and somehow some seeds ends up in Europe or somewhere else, you can imagine the hell that's going to break loose. Anyway, I think I should shut up and just say that the likelihood of seeing something as simple as gene-edited products in the field is higher. I hear that the European Court is being talked with again to reverse the decision. There's a good likelihood that it will be reversed. So that's why we have focused on what we have focused on. Gene editing cannot do all the things that transgenic approach can do, but at least in a limited way, it can contribute. It does have a role in the multiple simple traits, but limited as compared to transgenic.
Thank you, Kamarpal. I think you have given a full coverage to the question. There is a question for Dr. Gill from Shahad Mansoor about the availability of new dwarfing gene to the countries like Pakistan. Kulvinder,
yes,
please
yeah.
let know what you say about that.
Right. So the short answer is yes, yeah, those are available, although it is company owned, but our company is also sort of along the lines of being non-profit. Our focus is Southeast Asia and other parts. These dwarfing genes are already being transferred in Egyptian background, as I said earlier. And our intention is to take these all over the world. So yeah, the short answer is yes, those are available. We just like to make sure that if we share and I don't have 15, 20 years to wait for that product to hit the market. We will have to do it quickly and rightly, and then we would stay involved if such a thing, but our intention is to take these genes all over the world. And then I'll be happy to further elaborate how it would work. Please contact me and we can just work out a plan.
Thank you, Kulvinder. There is a question for both of you. In Pakistan, zinc and iron deficiencies are big, and there are, ideas of improving zinc and iron availability in the wheat flour, fortification as well as bioavailability. What is the breeder's answer to that? Kulvinder, you can go first.
Okay, so I know there's that Harvest Plus been doing great job over the last, I think, 15 to 20 years, trying to put iron zinc in the grain, and that has some success, not all. So the approach, and then again, this is the project we are just working on in rice. Our approach is increase this in rice straw and reduce silica and oxalate in rice straw, because rice straw is a tremendous fodder. Earlier you mentioned milk and all. So we think that this approach can solve multiple problems. So what we want to do is convert rice straw into an edible and useful fodder. That way all this straw that's available can become a very good fodder, and then increase iron and zinc in the straw. So either it will go to milk, because milk quality is becoming pretty poor too, and there's really not good standards to measure milk quality other than fat content. And then if it stays in grain, then it will end up in human food. So that's kind of what my view that we feel that can be a good approach to address iron zinc, because in the seed, unless we stop milling and then other processes, then even if it is in the seed, it is an outer layer which usually get removed. So it's a tough challenge. So we think that going through the straw route is a better route.
Yeah, I was muted. I tried to speak earlier. So sorry, I was talking to myself. Dr. Mansoor also asked this question earlier. Zinc and iron, I think CIMMYT has a dedicated breeder, Velu Govindan. Imtiaz is our country rep, and there is a variety released by CIMMYT in Pakistan. It's called Zincol. I think it was a couple of years ago. It has increased level of zinc. However, what I have done is something I didn't want to get into in detail, that developed this high throughput assays. That's a full-fledged program which has recently been funded to actually help breeders select, not in earlier stages, but later stages. Let's say they have 300 lines that Velu, for example, screened from process 30 lines initially used to make the current type of selection. Do the final 300, 400 lines that they have in stock to phytic acid, because phytic acid is a chelator for divalent cations, which is zinc and iron, both of which are. So it's not only the zinc and iron content of the grain, but the ratio of zinc and iron to phytic acid. It has to be within a certain range. What we discovered after the fact, that of the 5 lines, 3 that Velu released, the 2 other lines actually had a more favorable phytic acid to zinc and iron ratio. So I have a full-fledged program in my lab, which is not gene editing, that's more on the biochemistry side, where we are focused on this nutrition, grain nutrition, not only phytic acid, but also, for example, polyphenol oxidase, which turns the flour. When I'm sure all you know, if you knead the flour and leave it out, it turns brown or dark, and that's polyphenol oxidase. And we can screen high throughput for polyphenol oxidase, as well as work on the other end. There's a single gene in the grain for polyphenol oxidase that we can knock out with gene editing. But we can also help, actually we find amazing variation for that trait, that some lines almost lack polyphenol oxidase. And you might have heard of the Arctic apple and this new potato, I forget the name of the Simplot variety, where they have knocked out the polyphenol oxidase, and the apple, you can cut it and leave it out for days. It never turns brown. Likewise, the potatoes, if you remember, those of you who cook in the kitchen, if you cut the potatoes, you know that they turn brown after 5 or 10 minutes without being cooked. And that's what polyphenol oxidase does. So I do have a separate program that we are addressing this problem head on. Then beyond that comes vitamin A and things like that. I just want to give you a glimpse as to what we are doing. So also, I think it answers Dr. Mansoor's question earlier.
Thank you, Kamarpal. Okay, there are 2 hands raised. First, Dr. Asif Ali and then Wasim. Asif.
Ji, sir, thank you very much for giving me the chance. You know, it is really an enriching seminar on a very relevant topic. In my opinion, briefly, I would, consider that we have all the graphs. We have potential yields, we have progressive growth yield, and the average yield. And there is a significant difference among all these. And the bottom line is there are agronomic problems, but seed replacement has been considered the most relevant. So in Pakistan, surely we have to kind of separate the 2 things: produce from the seed in all crops generally, and particularly in wheat. We have produced, but we do not grow wheat as seed. Number 1. Number 2 is that if we keep on asking that seed corporation will grow seed for all the farms, no, it is not possible. We have been discussing this for quite a while. So in my clear opinion, we have to make the wheat seed business attractive for the private seed companies and affordable for the farmers. And, it has been discussed that perhaps hybrid is one of the models which can bring, these things together, make it attractive for the private seed companies, go for seed replacement every year and make it affordable for the farmers. There had been discussion that the hybrid seed cost of production is high. Now, luckily, we'll have a seminar with Richard again, inshallah. But essentially, we have now developed the whole system here, the BLA system for hybrid seed production. And this year, we had given the hybrid seed to the seed companies, and at least 4 hybrids with major private seed companies that is attractive to them. And I believe that will bring a change. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much again. And I appreciate your leadership for arranging such type of seminars and kind of talking about the mainly food security and overall agricultural perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Asif.
I just want to say one thing, Dr. Ali, that's an excellent point, because in Africa, for example, even though Africa lags way behind our Northwest India and Pakistan, this is what CIMMET does. CIMMET hands over its elite lines to the small seed companies. No royalty, nothing. But the only thing is they have to write that they will use it just for themselves, because there are so many companies that are competing interests. So I agree with you fully that is what the year they have, they won't even have that, but for the smaller seed companies coming into play. So the big players don't get in there because they can't make enough money. And the government services like research seed corporations don't have the resources to produce all the seed. And it's a shame if just the lack of good seed becomes a reason for low productivity. So making it somehow palatable to small companies, seed companies, and you have to keep track on them, because normally what happens when it goes private sector in our part of the world, that there's lots of corruption and spurious seed. That happens in Africa as well. One of the reasons people they hang on to the same line of hybrid for 30 to 35 years in Africa. The reason is this: they are more comfortable with something they grow from the same seed supplier year after year than they are willing to experiment with someone. One lost crop, that's it. And that could happen in Pakistan, and I'm sure it happens. So you have to find some credible players who are willing to do this, multiply the seed and sell it at a reasonable cost. And if government wants to subsidize it for the farmers, even the better. That's the best use of subsidies. So that's my just 2 cents worth of view on this.
Thank you, Kamarpal. Okay, Wasim and then Buttar. Wasim Saab. Is Wasim there? Okay, if not, Buttar Saab, you are asking, raising hand. Please go ahead.
My question to Dr. Dugga is CIMMET in Pakistan is providing 400,000 lines. They are basically spearheading the National Coordination Program in wheat. But the proper spearheading of this program, right from distribution of the nurseries to the breeding level, is not so done by the CIMMET. That's why we have most of the varieties released here are simply without any breeding process. My submission is that when CIMMET is holding the National Wheat Program, they have to ensure that the seed nurseries are going to the institutes and they are participating in the proper breeding process. And secondly, my request will be to start the pre-breeding programs, because in Pakistan we have multiple factors. We have these temperature problems, we have the humidity problems, we have the rust problems, and more so the biofortification and the production problems. If we have the gene parameting or the breeding programs, then we can control the spread of nurseries. If you see the directory of wheat release in Pakistan, you will bear me out that many of the varieties released in Pakistan are the ditto copies you people have supplied as nurseries. How you can control this system so that we have a very good variety in our system, and that variety pass to the BNS. The breeder who is not maintaining the BNS cannot be involved in further nursery programs. Can you help me, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll pass on your concerns to the appropriate people at CIMMYT. I heard you. But if I can speak, and I'm not in a position actually to speak on their behalf, but I'll give you my take of what I observe, that given the limited budget that CIMMYT has, it's being pushed by the donors to spread out its program to local, exactly like you said, that if CIMMYT could do pre-breeding in a location or target environment directly instead of sending the seed from Oregon, that would be more productive. Yes, of course. And I alluded to that earlier, that industry is already doing it, right product for the right acres. And you have to breed it where it's needed. I don't disagree with you. Actually, I fully agree with you on that concept. But whether that's economically or financially possible, or the NRS, the National Research Programs, they can work more closely with CIMMYT to do that. I think CIMMYT is in the business of supplying more elite, advanced lines. And then the selection at the local level is the best way to proceed. The whole project, the process is designed to minimize the cost and maximize the output. But I bet that if you invest more, and if you start that pre-breeding in the target environments directly, that you will see a result. Yes, there will be increased productivity, of course. But it all comes down to this combination of factors, which is investment and the willingness of the local government, because that's where most of the money comes from. Private sector has not been getting into this self-pollinated crops yet, because there simply isn't enough money. So I should stop. I think I said what I want to say. I don't know if I answered your question, but I will go back and discuss with my CIMMYT colleagues very directly.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are almost on for 2 hours. Very focused discussion. We're grateful to our keynote speakers, both Drs. Kamarpal Singh Duga and Dr. Kulvinder Singh Gill. I'm personally indebted to both of them for accepting my invitation and agreeing to it instantly. The discussion can continue through personal contacts, and I'll be also happy to mediate where required. You can send me questions that I can pass it on to both of our esteemed resource persons. I'm also grateful to the minister who spent hour and a half with us and then gave us his word of wisdom. I believe that the participants would have enjoyed their presence here. 92 were present and 76 remained put till the end. So that has given us a lot of encouragement. This being the first episode, I hope that this interest shall be sustained and we will be able to continue with similar debate and dialogue for a better agriculture and food security in the country. Thank you all.
Just a correction, you didn't ask, you ordered and then you twisted our arm to speak. Anyway, it was fun to see you all. This was my, I spoke earlier last year to Dr. Mansoor's, one of his conferences, but this is great to see a multitude of expertise and people, administrators and extension specialists and so on and so forth. This is great, really. I look forward to visiting in person someday and getting to see some of you. Excellent.
Likewise, thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.